Welcome everyone to our second Palooza for the Super Bowl this weekend, Super Bowl 59. Here's what we're going to do. Grant and I, are going to be giving out our next set of props. And then at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Chris Raybon and Sean Kerner will be joined by our good friend and guest, Matthew Friedman, at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, right here on the Action Network YouTube and podcasts. And because we need more bets, we're going to keep giving you all these props. We're going to sweat them together on Sunday. Before we do that, I want to let you all know for each pick, as soon as we give them out, we'll be giving you easy to use links to instantly place your bets right here in the YouTube chat. Then as soon as we wrap up, we'll also be dropping a link in the episode description that gives you access to all of the picks we've given out here on this show. So it's time to get to the picks. Grant will have his first pick. Grant, what do you got?
I was going to go with heads again. I still have the lean there, but I'm still undecided. There's lots of things going for both heads and tails. So instead, I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown score. Now, you can get this anywhere from minus 110, I think is the best line over at DK, all the way up to minus 120, minus 130 in some spots. I still like it at minus 120, minus 130 might be getting a little bit thin of a edge, but I still have edge on it at minus 130. It's just very thin. We have a huge sample size of Jalen Hurts in rushing touchdowns. I mean, 12 out of 18 games so far this season, one of which he left in the first quarter, 11 out of 18 last season, 12 out of 18 games the season before. Last time these teams played each other, he had 3 rushing touchdowns. We know if they get within the 1-2 yard line, they are going to do the tush push. Like it's just what they've been doing for literally 3 seasons now, and it's incredibly consistent. This should be a high scoring, close game, 1.5 point spread, 48.5 total. Yes, the Eagles are probably going to run the ball a decent amount with Barkley, but we keep saying, like, how can he keep getting these 1 to 2 yard rushes? It's just how this offense kind of goes. I mean, they have had more third downs, I think, than any other team this season because they get small chunks of yards because they rush the ball and they rush it very well. And they know that they can get that last 1 to 2 yards every single time with the tush push. So they are more often going to be in that scenario than other teams. He has been absolutely fantastic so far this year with the tush push, as he has in prior years past. He leads the league, right, with QB rushing attempts in the red zone, specifically within the 5 yard line by a massive margin. We're getting it close to a coin flip. Like we're getting it at like a 52.5% probability here. We have a 3 year sample size, and if we go with the playoffs, it's 5-3 so far in his
Yeah.
last 3 years, which is all the times he's made the playoffs. Every single number points to him being drastically more likely to get a touchdown than not get a touchdown, and we're getting it at minus 110. I don't generally like betting touchdown bets at minus numbers. One of the few scenarios is running backs with huge workloads like Derrick Henry, but I'm not going at minus 180. We're getting a similar scenario, a similar chance of scoring for a guy at minus 110 here. So Hurts, I feel like the line is far too low at minus 110.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to save my Jalen Hurts analysis here because there will be more to come on Jalen Hurts. So for my first player prop, we're going to head over to FanDuel. And it's a little tricky to find. Instead of clicking into the game, right? Just if you're at FanDuel, just load up, go to the NFL tab. And then instead of clicking into the game, scroll over to receiving props because there is where my first bet is going to be. And it is over 5.5 Eagles players to record a reception. So kind of went through each player and looking at AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Barring an injury, these players are all 95% plus, 98% plus to have a catch. Saquon Barkley, based off our projections, is around 85 to 90% to have a catch, barring an injury. So we're already at like 4 players that are probably going to have a reception. We need to find 2 more. Well, if we look at Jahan Dotson and whoever is the Eagles RB2, right? Of course, Gainwell dealing with a concussion. Hopefully he plays. That certainly would help this. But even if it's Will Shipley replacing Gainwell, one or more of Dotson and the Eagles RB2 is around 75% to have a catch here. So that gets us to 5 if it's one of the two. And if it's both, we're already over 5.5. If not, if it's just one of the two, we need to find one more player. Well, there's a lot of ways that we can get one more player to have a reception here, right? And I've got this at about a 50-50 chance. Just some other player gets a reception. It could be Johnny Wilson. It could be Grant Calcaterra. Those are the two most likely candidates outside of the players we've named so far. Maybe Paris Campbell plays one snap and one route and gets one reception, or EJ Jenkins, right? Tight end 3. Maybe it's a random lineman, right? Or Jalen Hurts on a gadget play, or maybe he catches his own batted pass, right? It's the Super Bowl. You're going to pull out all the stops here. Maybe you're going to go with a fake punt. We saw the Commanders do that last weekend, I should say 2 weekends ago now, because of the bye week. But, this is the Super Bowl. This is where you have prepared all season, and especially these last 2 weeks for this game. Maybe your most successful trick play, that's where you pull it out. So I think if any spot is likely to have an extra player randomly get a catch, it is going to be here. And also, just both the times this year the Eagles have come off of rest, whether it was the bye week or coming into week 1, or I should say all 3 times, they're coming into the Rams game. I should say, never mind, the Packers game. I was thinking there was a bye week between the wild card. Ignore that part, but you get the point. The 2 times they've come off rest, they have had over 5.5 players catch a pass. So yeah, there could be an injury, right? Like maybe Devontae Smith gets a catch and partway through the game he gets injured, and then another wide receiver has to step up. There's lots of ways for this 6th player to get a reception. So overall, I have this around 47.5%, which means that's pretty solid value at plus 138 at FanDuel. I'd play this to plus 115.
I like it. I was trying to figure out if there was an easier way to find it while you were talking, and I think you just have to go to the receptions page. I was trying to figure out a way to search it, and none of the search results were working. I was hoping that would make it easier for people, but you guys just got to scroll through the receiving props, it looks like.
That's right. So those are our first picks. Before we get to our next picks, the stage is set for Super Bowl 59 and all the prop bets to come. That means now is the perfect time to upgrade to an Action Pro subscription, because only Action Pro subscribers get real-time pick alerts from our experts like Super Bowl prop masters Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon, plus myself and Grant. You'll get all the tools you need to turn a profit betting in 2025. Right now, new subscribers can get $40 off a full year of Action Pro at actionnetwork.com/SB. That's $40 off for the full year, so you'll be covered for the next Super Bowl, March Madness, Major League Baseball season, NBA, and even the next college football and NFL seasons. So don't wait. Visit actionnetwork.com/SB to get $40 off of Action Pro. All right, we've each given a pick. I am going to take the lead here on this next one. This next one is my favorite prop bet. It is going to be over at DraftKings, and it is listed under rushing props. So last year I gave out Christian McCaffrey's first rush attempt over 3.5 yards. That sailed over. It was my favorite. Well, if you're in the Action Network Discord, I said I didn't have any value on running back first rush attempts, but I never said I didn't have value on the quarterback first rush attempts. So I'm going with Jalen Hurts over 2.5 rushing yards on his first rush attempt. You can get that minus 130 at DraftKings. And look, this is a spot where I'm showing plenty of value to the over. Hurts' first carry median this year is 6 yards. And if we go back to 2022, like you were talking about, Grant, the tush push era, his median is 4.5 on 54 first carries. In fact, 33 of the 54, right? Because we're looking at 2.5 and his median's 4.5. 33 of the 54, so that's 61.1%, have cleared this 2.5 line. And of the 54 first carries, only 7 of those were tush pushes. And even one of those still cleared the 2.5 yards. He got 3 yards on one of those 7 tush pushes. So that means on 47 non-tushes, that's a technical term here, his median was 10 yards. So, if he doesn't have a tush push as his first carry, there's a very good chance this clears 2.5. If we look just to expand the sample size at first drive carries, his median is 4 yards. Only 7 of the 60 first drive carries were tush pushes in those 3 years. 33 of 60, I should say 33, yeah, of 60 have cleared the 2.5. Also, 58% of all of his first quarter carries have cleared 2.5. So this minus 130 number is just too low. I have this closer to like minus 150. Plus, he gets the added benefit here, and I say added benefit, of facing Kansas City. Kansas City's defense allows the second highest rate of scrambles per drop back to the quarterback position. A lot of that comes from they play a hefty rate of man coverage, and also they use a lot of too high safety. So when you're in man coverage, you're turning your back to the receivers, to the quarterback, I should say. And when you have two high safeties, that's one less man in the box. That gives you ample opportunity to scramble. Kansas City right at the average 7.9 yards per carry allowed on QB scrambles. And Jalen Hurts averaging right around 9 yards as a median on his scrambles. So when you increase that scramble chance as well, that increases the chances his first carry is a scramble, which tend to go for 8-9 yards. So like I said, I like this to around minus 150 at 2.5. Still like anything over 3.5 at minus 110 or better. Grant, what's your second pick?
Second pick, you can either go with this at 4.5 receptions. I think I'm going with AJ Brown's over, but 4.5 reception, I think it's like minus 160 at 4.5. I took the over 5.5. It's plus 125 over a bet 365. And a lot of people might look at his game log and think this is probably not a great bet, but he's getting a 31% target share in the season. Chiefs have not been great versus wide receiver one so far this season. I think they're ranked near the bottom of the league in DVOA versus true wide receiver one so far this season, which if you look at their schedule, it's just silly how lucky they have been going up against wide receivers. I mean, they haven't had a ton of great ones, but Buffalo doesn't really have a true wide receiver one. When they went up against the Chargers, Palmer was the number one guy. Ladd was obviously out. When they went up against the Bucks, both Evans and Godwin were out. Like, so they've had a lot of different ones, but the main ones that I've seen are actually true wide receivers outside of Pickens, who went under, and I think Olave, who went under. Outside of that, Collins 5 receptions, Collins 7 receptions, Judy 11, Myers 6 and 6, Sutton 6, Ladd 5, London 6, Flowers 6. So the majority of true wide receiver ones have hit the over at this. Now we look at AJ Brown's overall game log, and you're not going to see a ton of times hitting the over on this. But guess what? How many times have the Eagles been trailing this season? It's been against Washington, the game that they lost. Granted, Hurts didn't play that game. AJ Brown had 15 targets. It was against the Bucks. AJ Brown didn't play. It was against the Falcons. AJ Brown didn't play. Pretty much every single game this season that AJ Brown has played in, with the exception of that Washington game near the end of the season where Pickett was starting, he has just played in games where they haven't really been trailing. So we know that he's going to get a large target share. Hurts, majority of game AJ Brown played in, he has had less than 28 total passing attempts. Line for this right now is 27.5, but we look at the games where he had 28 plus pass attempts. With AJ Brown playing, Washington last game, obviously he had 6 receptions, and Hurts had 28 pass attempts. We look back further, we see Pittsburgh, he had 32 pass attempts. AJ Brown had 11 targets, 8 receptions. Not many other times outside of that. Most of them are earlier on in the season where they were trailing, but 10 targets in the Packers game for Hurts when he had 34 pass attempts. So it's heavily correlated, obviously, with the biggest target share guy in the offense, how many times Hurts is going to throw, and the line is higher than it normally is because they're a 1.5 point dog and there's a 48.5 point total in this spot here. So everything's pointing to most likely more volume for Brown. More important game means probably going to have a higher target share than he normally does because he is the best offensive weapon there outside of maybe Saquon Barkley, most likely Saquon Barkley. So this is just a spot where we should see a decent amount of increase in volume for AJ Brown against a team that has been susceptible for wide receiver ones. So I like the over 5.5. If you want to go over 4.5, you want to be one of those game log watchers. I think he's hit that in 60% of games so far this season that he's played with Hurts. But I'm going with the over 5.5. And if you want to go over 6.5, over 7.5, I don't mind either of those lines either because I think Brown could be in for a decent amount of volume. And 8.5, I think, is sitting as high as like plus 480 in some spots. So you can ladder this up as high as you want. I'm sticking with the semi-safe one at over 5.5 at plus 125, but feel free. It's the Super Bowl. I know I probably will have money on every single one of those ladders all the way up to 9 plus. Probably not a ton, but just to make it more interesting because it's a game I want to stay entirely tuned to. So once I've already made all my money, I want to have a reason to keep rooting for AJ Brown.
There you go. So Grant with AJ Brown over 5.5 receptions. He's even fine if you want to ladder it. I last week talked about laddering Dallas Goedert. So, there could be a little bit of a correlation here. If the Eagles are behind, they're going to have to keep throwing and hopefully both hit. But if not, at least one of the two should hit. And you're getting them at plus money on those ladders. So you would end up making money if one of these two ladders ends up hitting. Uh, so I talked about the Action Network Discord briefly earlier, but I just want to remind you all, make sure to join the Action Network Discord if you haven't at discord.gg/Action Network, because we will be doing our live show, Bet What Happens Live at halftime of the Super Bowl. Who needs Kendrick Lamar? You can't make money watching Kendrick Lamar, but you can potentially make money betting during halftime of the Super Bowl. Live betting with our live betting show, Bet What Happens Live. We're using my in-game player prop model along with Sean Kerner's projections to live bet. And man, we've been having an awesome NFL playoffs live betting. So again, make sure to join the Action Network Discord at discord.gg/Action Network. All right, I have one more pick for you all. And again, it is a Jalen Hurts prop. And the way to find this one, again, is at DraftKings. But you're going to have to scroll over all the way at the top to game leaders. And then once you're over on the game leaders tab, you're going to need to scroll and find first quarter leaders. And that's because I'm going with Jalen Hurts to have the most first quarter rushing yards at plus 950 at DraftKings. Now, if we look at just the Eagles side of the ball here first, Jalen Hurts has had the most first quarter rushing yards in 2 of 17 games this year. I know he's played 18, but there was one where the leading rusher was 0 yards, right? So we're not going to count that one because everybody tied. But in the other 17, Hurts has led in 2 of 17, right? That's 1 out of every 8.5. If that was the true long-term rate, then plus 750 would be fair value. So plus 950, already a good distance off from that. Now, even though he led in 2 of those 17 games, he actually had 23 yards in both of those that he led. But there were 2 other games where he had 41 and 44 first quarter yards. Yet Saquon Barkley still led in the first quarter in both of those games. But here, the Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo have said they're really focusing all week, all 2 weeks on stopping Saquon Barkley. And that could open up the potential for Jalen Hurts here. And I talked about Jalen Hurts' first rush over 2.5. Well, of the 4 quarters, the first quarter is where Jalen Hurts has his highest yards per carry. So, we can expect instead of 25% of his rushing yards to come in the first quarter, probably more like 35% of his total rushing yards to potentially come in the first quarter. Now, unless the Eagles are trailing late and they need to do a bunch of scrambling. But even then, if you're doing a bunch of scrambling, you're running the clock, which isn't exactly the thing you'd want to do if you're trailing. So I really like this first quarter angle. The Chiefs, again, they allow scrambles at an incredibly high rate, and those go for much more yardage than designed runs. Hurts median of 9 yards per carry. Chiefs allow almost 8 yards per carry on scrambles. There's a chance, we see Jalen Hurts run for 20 plus yards here in the first quarter. And if we look at the Chiefs side of the ball, I think it's pretty unlikely a Chief is going to lead here. Look, I mean, even if we look at Kareem Hunt, right? His line is around 44.5-ish yards, give or take a little bit. You divide that by 4. It doesn't exactly work like that, like I talked about with Hurts. But, we're talking, he's probably not getting 20 first quarter yards. Similar for Pacheco, similar for Mahomes. We got Xavier Worthy in the mix. So I don't really expect the Chiefs to lead the first quarter rushing yards. And if they do, it's probably going to be because the Eagles also didn't get a lot of rushing yards, right? The Eagles are the number one rush defense in the NFL. And the Chiefs have a very good run defense themselves. They're number 9 by defensive rush DVOA, but that tends to come more against these designed runs with Barkley and potentially Hurts. But if all it takes is Hurts to scramble for a long run here, and I talked about that, the Chiefs allow the second highest rate of scrambles per drop back. So I think this is a spot where we got to take Jalen Hurts, and really, the Eagles are probably the team to have the leading rusher here. Uh, as far as the coin toss, right? Who is more likely to have the ball in the first quarter? Both coaches have deferred 100% of the time each of the last 2 years. So I would expect this to be a spot where there's no edge in the first quarter in terms of which team has the ball first. So in that case, we can just go ahead and play what we think is going to happen. And I think this is a spot where Jalen Hurts plus 950 is too long. I got this closer to like plus 825, plus 850 in that neighborhood. For example, if you look at this at FanDuel, it's at plus 790 at FanDuel. So I love the plus 950 at DraftKings. Grant, any last thoughts on that Jalen Hurts prop?
No, I mean, I love it. I mean, you talked about Kareem Hunt most likely not leading on that side. Um,
Yeah.
it's because he's probably going to need 5, 6 rush attempts in order to get up to 20 yards. I mean, he's not a guy that can break off too often a 10-plus-yard rush. I mean,
Right.
Pacheco occasionally can, but still a guy that's going to pound it up the middle, try and get an extra yard or two, and most likely end up with 5 or 6. So you have guys on the Chiefs side of things where I think Mahomes is the most likely guy to be leading out of the Chiefs side of things in rushing yards after the first quarter because he can do a 15 to 20 yard scramble. And that's kind of contingent on Barkley not doing too much and Jalen Hurts doing too much. So the overall median outcome for Hunt and Pacheco is pretty darn close to their overall ceiling outcomes in the first quarter. So yeah, you're really just going kind of Hurts versus Barkley, and Hurts absolutely has the ability to break off a 30, 40 yarder in any of the quarters of the game, and he's probably going to be rushing the ball a decent amount. If there's been talk about how the Chiefs are probably going to try and blitz a decent amount in the spot because of how much Hurts has struggled against the blitz so far this season. So if that happens, he's probably going to end up taking off more. You talked about the designed runs versus actually scrambling runs, which are going to give you the largest ceiling. So yeah, everything you said is just absolutely perfect there. And now I'm currently on the DraftKings page, trying to figure out if I can same game parlay it with something else, but doesn't look like
Yeah.
I'm going
I
to be
don't
able
think it's
to. So plus
SGPable.
950 is what I have to deal with, and I'm entirely okay with that.
There we go. And to put a bow tie on one thing I said on the Eagles over 5.5 players with a reception, they did have 3 weeks of 3 games, I should say, with long rest. The wild card game against the Packers. Remember, in week 18, none of the starters played. So that's kind of like a bye week there for the starters. So I was thinking correctly. I just couldn't remember it off the cuff there. But that will do it for our Propapalooza number 2. I should say week 2. So thank you all for watching. Chris Raybon, Sean Kerner, and special guest Matthew Friedman will be back right here in less than 2 hours, 6 p.m. Eastern time, to give their favorite props. So until then, and until the Super Bowl where we see you for Bet What Happens Live, we'll catch you all later.